Well, Donald Trump's 25% tariff threat on Canadian goods has been delayed for 30 days. It's still unclear where Canada-U.S. relations will go from here. Our two countries, though, have come back from a similar incident before. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon imposed a 10% across-the-board U.S. tariff. Here's what Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau had to say at the time.
I think it's very important that we don't panic in this case, and that we argue our case with the Americans, as Mr. Benson and Mr. Pepe have been doing, as the officials are doing, and find a solution which is in the spirit of international trading and not in the spirit of trade wars.
Fast forward about a half a century and we're in a similar place. The Angus Reid Institute says Canadians are responding with a boost in patriotism now. The number of people who say they're very proud of their country has risen from 34% to 44% compared to 2 months ago. The same percentage increase is seen in those who say they have a deep emotional attachment to Canada. For more on all of this, we're joined by Stewart Prest, political science lecturer at the University of BC. Stewart, always good to see you. First of all, do you see a pattern in how the 1971 tariffs came down and how Trump's threats are playing out now?
Well, I think there are definitely some similarities in the situation where then as now the United States was feeling economic pressure where it was losing some of its competitive edge relative to a world that was catching up. And in that case, the United States was in a more central position in the global order. It was the architect of the institutions of the post-war era at that point. The things like the World Bank and the IMF and the use of the dollar as a reserve currency, and all that was starting to fall apart. Effectively, what we're seeing now is the tail end of that process where the United States is fully trying to disentangle itself from the world and really try to strike back and push back wherever and to as much as it feels like it can.
Of course, in 1971, we did not have a free trade agreement with the United States. What impact, is it still a relatively fair comparison then?
Well, I think it's an interesting comparison where we see the fallout from that incident and others like it was sort of a fork in the road for Canada, where there was an attempt to try to identify a third option, some kind of trading option that wasn't domestic, that wasn't the United States, that was looking to places like Europe for trade. And ultimately, that boomeranged back so that by the end of the 1980s, the idea of free trade with the United States had really triumphed, and we entered into this ever deepening phase of the relationship. And now we seem to be back at that fork in the road where we have a choice between trying to placate the United States and try to build on that relationship, rebuild it, or once again strike out for a different direction.
The Angus Reid data we mentioned shows the potential tariff threat has increased patriotic feelings amongst those who were polled. What do you make of that response?
I think it is a sense that we are seeing a real rally around the flag moment here, where despite a kind of distancing among Canadians from a Canadian identity in recent years, we're seeing a resurgence of that patriotic belief. And I think it really does stem from the sense that Canadians do see value here, and seeing someone bully the country a little bit throws that value into sharper relief, and people are starting to remember what it is they really like about this place once it is perhaps in a little bit of peril.
All right. And lastly, quickly, where do you see Canada-U.S. relations going from here?
I mean, there are a lot of different directions here. We are in a moment of prolonged uncertainty. It's the unpredictability is the only thing we seem to be able to count on. So I hesitate to make strong predictions, but I think we are going to see a pattern of perhaps of threat and resolution, renewed threat and resolution, as we try to find ways to try to short circuit that process and look to rebuild a more insulated economy. But that's a short-term and a long-term process rolled into one. So it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Stewart Prest, political science lecturer at UBC. We always appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.